campaign was over. Bernie had lost. I was assisting and helping with a number of Facebook pages here in California. I started to see strange people appearing. Their posts were coming from American-sounding websites. But when I peeled away the layers, Eastern Europe became a common theme. They were propaganda pieces. Not a single one of them true. All viciously anti-Hillary. This isn't just one Sanders page. It's Latinos for Sanders, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan for Sanders. It kept on going.
While we were focusing on the positive of social media and information technology, Russia was looking at how to use that as an instrument, and they have been incredibly effective.
With cyber, with social media, with things like RT, they can reach out to Western publics in a way that they couldn't do 35, 40 years ago. Some of their predecessors would be really envious of the techniques that they have now.
How the Russian state does its influence operations online is pretty complex. On the one hand, you have real people, trolls, but a bigger part is actually digital disinformation, making user accounts that are algorithms. This is the evolution of artificial intelligence online.
Russians figured out how you game Google. If you have enough bots to drive it to the top of the Google suggestion list.
Any wedge that's there, they're going to test that audience out. And when they find success, then they exploit it. They double down on it. You might see them show up around Black Lives Matter protests and in the counter-protest movement. Any anti-government or white supremacist group, nationalist, not globalist, anti-EU, anti-NATO, anti-immigration.
Promoting the far right, promoting the far left, so that our politics become more polarized. Then Putin can feed lies to either side because they hate each other so much. If we're divided as Americans, then it's harder for us to stand up to that influence.
They know that in the West, there's a tendency towards positivism. There's a tendency towards, well, I don't know, that's a story that's out there. We can't just discredit it. You know, we have to, maybe it's right. The Russians know that we do this as Westerners. They see it coming and they take it to the bank every single time.
The Westerners are lazy. I mean, they don't do research. Russians have already done everything for them, and they know how to pack it and how to feed it to them.
Russia wins the audience first and then directs them somewhere. It's very different from American approaches. Americans are impatient. You just create pictures, you create bios that look like accounts that are from these locations because people are more likely to take in information from people that look like them and talk like them. Follow everybody that's in that community, you retweet what they say, lowering the guard of that audience so they would accept Russian information or Russian views. Over time, begin inserting the content you want.
In this office building in St. Petersburg, an army of trolls. They were even caught on camera, secretly filmed by a former employee.
The US elections are the key issue for the Kremlin, and of course Russia has invested a lot of effort into them. It's so sophisticated and adapted for the tastes of internet users that it's almost impossible to recognize.
You have serious quotas, so in an hour you have to produce 20 tweets, 30 comments on these websites, so it's actually like a work environment for these people.
12 hours a day praising the Kremlin and berating its enemies.
I myself have a number of Russian trolls. I know whenever I refer to the illegal annexation of Crimea, I get quite a bit of criticism.
An interview like this, once it goes out on the internet, I'll receive some sort of trolling very specifically around it. The goal is essentially to get you to shut up and to not be a challenger. They'll threaten lawsuits, for example, because they know nothing affects an American like the threat of a lawsuit. If you're operating in Europe, the closer you get to Moscow, the more your physical life is actually in danger. Can try and break into your bank accounts, hack you financially. And if they can't get to you personally, they'll target your family. They create false stories, seed it out there to try and destroy your reputation.
You plant an idea, a fake story, a lie.
It will take on a life of its own, and you don't have to do the propagating. The audience will do it for you. Seth Rich was a campaign worker for Hillary Clinton. He turned up dead. The Seth Rich story was that he was the one who stole the Democratic Committee emails. There's no evidence to support that. To date, it's an unsolved murder, but it's propagated both by the alternative right, but also by groups like WikiLeaks, even to the point where you had Russian ambassadors show up and say, I think there might be something to this Seth Rich story. That doubt that's there really covers your hand over the longer term.
And sometimes the most outrageous are the ones that you think that you don't want to dignify with a response to, but that I've subsequently learned that's a kind of dangerous proposition.
John Podesta said, let's go, over to the pizza place, and all of a sudden it's a story about a child trafficking ring in the basement, which doesn't exist, in the pizza place.
Resulted in a person who had been reading this stuff deciding that he would deputize himself to come up here with a gun, firing that weapon in the pizza parlor. But it just sort of never ends.
In 2013, they were starting to learn the power of this influence. In 2014, they were doing capability development. 15 was winning audiences so that in 2016, we could actually go after the U.S. election. The primary message would be, one, Hillary Clinton cannot become president. The second one is Trump is the man to mend fences with Russia, and he's a great leader and a nationalist, much like Putin. The third one was Bernie Sanders got a raw deal, but you shouldn't even come out to the polls.
The Russians, in line with right-wing radical media, were creating false stories to generate fear. And it's story after story after story.
Secretary Clinton had a serious disease.
Multiple sclerosis.
Hillary's going to cause nuclear war.
Murder of 30 people. Funding ISIS. Smuggling drugs.
Untrustworthy.
Pedophilia.
Crooked.
Hillary Clinton is a she-devil.
Totally creepy falsehood.
Sometimes we found in the United States our greatest strength, free speech, open societies, democracy, can also be one of our greatest vulnerabilities.
I don't think we were fully aware of the impact, the effects that it was having. So much of it seemed surreal, ridiculous.
By utilizing our openness, they exploited us. If people that I knew personally to be thinking, thoughtful people, if they were sharing the propaganda, who else was sharing it?
Everyone falls for fake news. I've fallen for fake news.
Over the course of the last 75 days, the top 20 demonstrably fake stories got more Facebook likes and shares than the top 20 campaign stories from mainstream media.
And laid the groundwork for Sanders supporters to say, I've had it.
They actually have won over a segment of the U.S. audience like Russia's never won over before. White nationalist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, where they chanted it.
Recent polling indicates that 49% of Republican voters, I'm sad to say, believe that Putin and that Russia are either an ally or a friendly nation.
The question is, who helped guide the decisions that the Russians were making, what ads they may have bought, what kinds of fake news they thought would be most effective?
If you know the personality of the people you're targeting, you can nuance your messaging to resonate more effectively with those key audience groups. This information's quite helpful to a campaign manager.
Cambridge Analytica popped up growing out of an experiment, behavioral science experiment at Cambridge University to see whether they could analyze large numbers of people using Facebook because people are spilling their feelings to their friends, hundreds of millions of people in their pool.
We have somewhere close to 4,000 or 5,000 data points on every adult in the United States. We can see where these people are on the map.
They were able to take that to micro segment. You belong to a group of 12 like-minded people, exactly like you, who are interested in the same things around the country.
These are people who are definitely going to vote, but they need moving from the center a little bit more towards the right.
You're not supposed to go into Facebook and harvest that kind of information. Cambridge Analytica got its Facebook data in a sort of quasi-legal way.
We can look at what issue they care about. Gun rights I've selected. That narrows the field slightly more. And now we know that we need a message on gun rights. It needs to be a persuasion message, and it needs to be nuanced according to the certain personality that we're interested in.
They were very involved in the Brexit vote.
We saw the Russian bot armies, the trolls, have a very pro-Brexit message.
There have been allegations that Cambridge Analytica supported it through a small office above a pizza shop, which is not exactly the kind of place you'd think would be the center for international intrigue, unless it was just a cutout for somebody much more consequential behind it.
Cambridge Analytica is owned by SCL.
A larger and much more sinister global election tampering operation using big data and technology.
SCL is in turn owned by shell companies that you can trace back to Dmitry Firtash, who again is tied to Mogilevich. That would complete the entire string and show crime boss Simeon Mogilevich involved, starting out with pure and simple money laundering in 1984 with Trump properties, going forward more than 32 years to the election in which this data mining firm, Cambridge Analytica, is playing a very, very big role with the Trump campaign and helping him win.
That of the two candidates left in this election, one of them is using these technologies, and it's going to be very interesting to see how they impact the next 7 weeks. Thank you.
One of the big investors in Cambridge Analytica is Robert Mercer. He's a hedge fund billionaire.
Cyber scientists on the outside noticed this server that was configured in a very unusual way. That was a direct link, essentially, from a Russian bank, Alpha Bank, and Trump Tower.
That would obviously explain a major path of communications.
Trump Tower, they seem to have premonitions of things that were going to happen that in fact did happen. Roger Stone in August saying it would be my turn in the barrel while he's simultaneously involved with WikiLeaks.
I actually have communicated with Assange. I believe the next tranche of his documents pertain to the Clinton Foundation, but there's no telling what the October surprise may be.
October 7th, 2016, three major things happened. The Department of Homeland Security and the Director of National Intelligence made a public statement and said the government hacking during the 2016 election was none other than the Russian Federation, and that this decision could have only been made by Vladimir Putin. On the same day, the Access Hollywood tapes were revealed.
I don't even know it. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the pussy.
After those two things, a third thing happened. John Podesta's emails were released.
WikiLeaks posted more than 2,000 additional emails from Hillary Clinton's campaign chair, John Podesta.
I never heard from the FBI until 2 days after my emails started getting released. He said, you may not be aware of this, but your emails have been hacked. I said, yes, I've been watching it for 48 hours on every cable store, in the country. That was actually the last time I talked to the FBI.
There was a lot more that was coming out that we were aware of that we couldn't get the press to pay any attention to. I tried in my speeches and then culminating in the third debate.
Look, Putin, from everything I see, has no respect for this person.
Well, that's because he'd rather have a puppet as president of the United States.
No puppet.
And it's pretty clear.
You're the puppet.
It's pretty clear you won't admit that the
puppet.
Russians have engaged in cyber attacks against the United States of America, that you encouraged espionage against our people, that you are willing to spout the Putin line, sign up for his wish list, break up NATO, do whatever he wants to do.
We went into Election Day believing that we had a lead in the popular vote, which proved to be true. Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, we felt like we had a lead in all those states, and that proved to be not true. So he won by a combined total in those three states of 70,000 votes, and gave him the presidency.
Sorry to keep you waiting. Complicated business. Complicated.
признала свое поражение на выборах президента Соединенных Штатов Америки, с чем я вас всех и поздравляю.
До конца шел, хотя никто не верил, кроме нас с вами, о том, что он победит. Вот.
During the transition, Jared Kushner met with a sanctioned Russian bank.
Gorkov, the head of that bank, got his training not in the Bankers Academy. He's a trained KGB agent. And its offices all around the world are always understood to be providing cover for Russian intelligence operations.
What did you really speak to Jared Kushner about in New York when you met him in December?
The Russian bank said they talked business. White House says they talked future U.S.-Russia relations.
If he was doing this for business purposes, it would be a violation of the law. And if he was doing this for political purposes, there are serious questions about whether he or anyone on the campaign were working with Russians during the interference campaign.
The crown jewel for any intelligence agency is to recruit an asset inside your adversary's intelligence agency. Because that person can, of course, report on intelligence operations against your own country.
For Donald Trump to put Michael Flynn in the role of National Security Advisor shows that they were extremely incompetent in their vetting of an individual who was working as an unregistered foreign agent on behalf of Turkey, who had extensive ties to a foreign adversary in Russia and wasn't disclosing those ties, or that was one of his highest qualifications, and Donald Trump liked that.
I was invited to take my old job as CIA director back. I learned that I would have had to have reported to the president through Mike Flynn. They pressed me to go to a particular meeting where there were several Turks present, and it was clear they were thinking seriously about taking into custody Gulen in western Pennsylvania, which would have been completely illegal under American law. I told them that and left. I decided I did not want to report through Mike, and so I turned down the offer.
President-elect Donald Trump sent out an email announcing his pick for Secretary of State, ExxonMobil Chairman and CEO Rex Tillerson, despite concerns over his close ties to Russia.
I mean, this is a guy who was given a friendship award by Vladimir Putin.
And I have a very close relationship with him, which dates back almost 15 years now.
I believe that Rex Tillerson was chosen by Donald Trump for primarily one reason. He would not stand in the way of Donald Trump's prevailing policy interest, which is to align the United States with Vladimir Putin's regime. And I think that's exactly what he's done. He's facilitated it.
Putin and Rex Tillerson have been trying to put together a $500 billion Arctic exploration deal.
ExxonMobil has won a highly coveted contract with Russia's Rosneft.
No, my philosophy is to make money. And so if I can drill and make money, then that's what I want to do.
But it was put on hold by the Obama administration when the sanctions were imposed.
One of the fascinating things in that dossier, Steel sources told them that Rosneft, big Russian oil company owned by the state, that 19% of it was going to be sold off, and that there'd be money for people who were able to get U.S. sanctions removed. Well, sure enough, in December, that percentage of Rosneft was sold off in a method by which involved shell companies in the Grand Caymans, which are non-transparent and which you can't penetrate.
Only someone in the highest echelons of Rosneft would have had access to that information.
And obviously somebody talking to Chris Steele knew a lot about it many months before it happened.
The Russian hand in these influence efforts, ultimately they'll try and hide it. And they do it with two methods, putting them in jail or killing people off.
Arrests in which people were dragged out and had black bags put over their heads, charged for treason. These people may have been Chris Steele's sources, or Russian intelligence may have suspected that they were. The day after Christmas, General Oleg Yervinkin, who was chief of staff of Rosneft, was assassinated in the back of a car in the center of Moscow.
The head of RT English, mysterious death in Washington, D.C. A Russian diplomat stationed here in New York City that actually died on Election Day.
You've got an obvious interest on the part of the Russians. And of course, on the other side of the equation, you have all of these contacts going back to Russia, whether it's Roger Stone, whether it's Flynn, whether it's any of these folks. There is simply way too much smoke for there to be absolutely no fire whatsoever.
I forget how many tentacles this has. It's just sort of, any one of these is a massive story. It's unrealistic to think it's limited to what we know now. Rather than look at this as one isolated of money laundering after another or one criminal appearing after another, I think it's much more than that. And what you have is probably the biggest intelligence breach in the history of the world.
So to be clear, Mr. Trump has no financial relationships with any Russian oligarchs.
That's what he said. That's what I said. That's obviously what our position is.
President of the United States.
Is, I believe, a puppet of Vladimir Putin. That is the near challenge that we face as Americans.
He has tried to deliver for Russia. He wanted to take off sanctions immediately.
I was in the administration for the first 5 weeks of Trump, where, among other things, I was responsible for the Russia sanctions. And I'm one of the people who was worried that the Trump administration would suddenly lift the sanctions unilaterally. And I stand by it now.
You don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to have been in a cover-up to see when somebody is acting like they're covering up. This man is clearly and conspicuously doing so.
I don't know how a president could handle the situation worse than President Trump is now. His actions at the G20, his talk of maybe getting in a cyber partnership. You don't go to somebody who just punched you in the face and then offer them a favor.
Мне кажется, было бы не совсем корректно с моей стороны в деталях рассказывать.
Trump has to have known he was compromised. He's got to know the eyes of the world on him. And suddenly, all these forces will be out to expose him. I cannot imagine living with that every day, you know?
The Trump campaign's biggest potential exposure is going to be in their financial dealings. It's very hard to cover up money trails. The other one is obstruction of justice.
Collusion is a media shorthand for, could be aiding and abetting. Conspiracy, it could be aid and comfort, which is treason.
The Russia story is a total fabrication. What the prosecutors should be looking at are Hillary Clinton's 33,000 deleted emails.
It is ongoing. The Russians' efforts here are continuing as we speak.
We've done zero, absolutely nothing to protect us from a future cyber attack with respect to any election. Zero. We haven't done anything.
As long as people can do things without penalty,
they're going to continue to do them.
We all have a stake, because it may have been the Democrats and me this time. It could be the Republicans and their candidate next time.
Every single national security official we've talked to has said they're coming back. We have to be ready for that.
If the people don't demand that, if they don't demand that our sovereignty needs to be defended, our representatives in Congress are going to kind of look the other way and move on.
What's at stake is truth. What's at stake is government that's accountable to us, and the cause of liberty at the most profound level possible.
We owe it to the people who have fought for and sacrificed for this democracy to be guardians of it and make sure that we always have free and fair elections.